A week after my son Michael's wedding, my daughter-in-law Vanessa appeared at my doorstep with an elegant stranger by her side. The man clutched a leather briefcase as if it contained precious gems. "Mother-in-law, meet Paul, he's a notary," Vanessa announced, her smile as artificial as sweetener. "We thought we'd help you sort through some paperwork regarding the house." My pulse quickened. I knew precisely what they were hunting for, but they had no inkling of the secret I'd been guarding these past months. Thank heaven I kept silent about the estate my late husband had left behind. Now, watching Vanessa's eyes devour my documents with barely concealed greed, I understood that my silence had been my shield. To tell this story properly, though, I must rewind to the day everything began to shift. The kitchen was warm with the scent of rising dough when Michael shared his news. My hands were deep in bread dough, working it with a rhythm I perfected over decades. "Mom, I want you to really get to know Vanessa before we tie the knot," Michael said, his smile lighting up his entire face, the same smile that had melted my heart since he was born. My son, my precious boy, had finally found love. "Of course, sweetheart. Bring her any time," I replied, dusting flour from my fingers onto my apron. I'd heard so much about her already. 32 years old, working in a prestigious office, always immaculately dressed with perfectly styled brown hair and flawless manicured nails. She sounded like a dream come true for my Michael. That afternoon, I rushed to the farmer's market, selecting only the finest ingredients: plump shrimp, ripe avocados, fresh poblano peppers, rich cream. I wanted to prepare all of Michael's childhood favorites. In my mind, I'd already painted pictures of our future together. The conversations we'd share, the family recipes I'd pass down, the grandmother wisdom I'd impart. I spent the entire evening cooking. My feet throbbed and swelled from hours of standing, but I didn't care. The main course emerged from the oven perfectly, creamy, fragrant, and exactly as Michael loved it. The cornbread rose like golden clouds. The salsa verde had just the right amount of heat that Michael had adored since childhood. When the appointed hour arrived, I dressed in my prettiest pink dress, reserved for only the most special occasions. I styled my hair carefully and even applied a touch of lipstick. First impressions matter. After all, this woman would be the mother of my future grandchildren. The doorbell's chime sent excitement coursing through me. I opened the door beaming. "Vanessa, what a joy to finally meet you." I opened my arms wide for a welcoming embrace. She barely grazed my shoulders with her fingertips, as though physical contact with me might contaminate her. "Pleased to meet you, ma'am," she murmured, her gaze sliding past me rather than meeting my eyes. Her voice carried the warmth of a winter wind. She wore an elegant emerald dress and stiletto heels that clicked against my humble floors like judgmental metronomes. Throughout dinner, I tried drawing her into conversation, asking about her interests, her career, her dreams with Michael. Every question met with a monosyllabic response. Yes, no, maybe. It was like attempting conversation with an ice sculpture. What wounded me most was how her eyes surveyed my home with unmistakable disdain, the way her nose wrinkled when she sampled my cooking, as if I'd serve her poison instead of love made edible. My signature dish, the one I'd been perfecting for 30 years, she barely touched. "Mom, this is absolutely delicious as always," Michael said, desperately trying to fill the uncomfortable silence that had settled over my table like fog. Vanessa picked at the food on her plate, separating each ingredient as though conducting a forensic examination. Her crimson nails, painted to perfection, looked jarring against my simple ceramic dishes. "Do you enjoy cooking, Vanessa?" I ventured hopefully, offering her more sauce. She lifted her gaze with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. "I don't have time for such things," she replied flatly. "I prefer ordering in or dining at proper restaurants." The word proper pierced my chest like a thorn. My food wasn't proper. My home wasn't proper. I wasn't proper. Michael coughed nervously and changed topics, but the message had been delivered. To Vanessa, everything about me was inferior. Over the following weeks, each visit became increasingly difficult. Vanessa would perch on the edge of my sofa as if afraid of contamination, constantly scrolling through her phone with an expression of profound boredom. She never inquired about my day, never showed the slightest interest in knowing me as a person. "Alice, you must be thrilled you'll have so much more time for yourself once we're married, right?" she remarked one afternoon while I was preparing coffee. Her words sounded less like observation and more like premature dismissal, as though she'd already decided to exile me from my son's life. More time for myself? I echoed, confused. "But I cherish spending time with both of you." She and Michael exchanged a look I didn't understand then, but I understand perfectly now. They were already planning my removal. The wedding preparations became my personal torture. Vanessa made every single decision without consulting me, treating me as though I were invisible. The cleaning lady could help with the flower arrangements. I overheard her say during a phone call one day. Several seconds passed before I realized she was referring to me. When I offered to bake the wedding cake myself, a family tradition spanning generations, Vanessa released a laugh that froze my blood. "Oh no, mother-in-law. Let's leave that to professionals. We can't risk it looking homemade." That night, I wept in my kitchen, clutching the apron my mother had given me on my own wedding day. My cakes had celebrated countless birthdays, baptisms, and graduations. But to Vanessa, my love transformed into pastry was merely homemade, a word she pronounced like a disease. The wedding day arrived like an approaching storm. I woke before dawn, selecting my most elegant purple dress, purchased specifically for this occasion. I had my hair styled at the neighborhood salon, where Linda gave me a beautiful updo that took years off my appearance. "You look stunning, Alice," she said, admiring her work in the mirror. "Your son will be so proud." Her words filled me with hope. Perhaps this day would mark a new beginning with Vanessa. I arrived at the church early, as is my habit. I wanted everything to be perfect for my son. Guests began trickling in, offering congratulations that I accepted with genuine warmth. Michael looked so handsome, so radiantly happy. "You must be incredibly proud," everyone said. But when the ceremony began, I noticed something that shattered my soul. Vanessa had arranged the seating so that I sat in the 5th row, behind her work colleagues, behind neighbors who barely knew Michael. The groom's mother relegated to the 5th row, like just another random guest. From my seat, I had to crane my neck to glimpse my own son walking down the aisle. Mothers of Vanessa's friends, women who'd never changed Michael's diaper or soothed his childhood fevers, had better seats than I did. I swallowed the lump in my throat and maintained composure, but something inside me began to fracture. During the reception, things deteriorated further. Vanessa introduced me to guests as Michael's mom, never as her mother-in-law, never using my name. It was as though I were an object, a label devoid of personality. "She's the one who cooks really well," she'd add with that counterfeit smile, reducing my entire existence to a domestic function. When the time came for toast, I waited patiently for my turn. I prepared heartfelt words about my son, about watching him grow, about my blessing for his new life. But Vanessa orchestrated the ceremony like a conductor, giving the floor to her parents, her siblings, her best friends, even co-workers. "What about the groom's mother's toast?" someone in the crowd finally asked. Vanessa turned toward where I sat, her smile glacial. "Oh, yes, of course. Alice, would you like to say something?" "Keep it brief." As if my 69 years of life and 30 years of motherhood deserved only a cursory comment. I stood on trembling legs, feeling every eye upon me. "I want to thank God for this beautiful day." I began, but I barely completed my second sentence when Vanessa began applauding, cutting me off mid-speech. The others followed her lead, and my voice drowned in forced applause. During dinner, they seated me at a back table with strangers, distant relatives of Vanessa, who conversed among themselves as if I didn't exist. From there, I watched my son laughing with his new in-laws, completely absorbed in his new life while I chewed chicken that tasted like cardboard. When dancing began, Michael danced first with Vanessa, then with her mother, then with her sisters. I waited, seated, smoothing my dress repeatedly, ensuring my smile didn't falter. But song after song played, and my son never turned toward where I sat. "Aren't you going to dance with your mom?" my friend Anthony asked when he stopped by to greet me. Michael laughed nervously. "Oh, yeah, sure. In a bit." But he continued dancing with other guests while I remained motionless at my table, feeling myself becoming more invisible with each passing minute. Around 11 o'clock, I decided to leave. I had to drive home, and I was exhausted from pretending everything was fine. "Sweetheart, I'm heading out," I said gently, touching his arm. He hugged me quickly, distracted by music and laughter. "Thanks for everything, Mom." "Love you," he murmured into my ear, but his eyes were already looking elsewhere. Vanessa materialized at his side like a possessive shadow. "Thanks for coming, mother-in-law," she said, but her tone sounded more like permanent dismissal than gratitude. As I walked to my car, clutching my purse and the gift I prepared with such love, I heard Vanessa comment to her friends, "Thank God she lives far away. Not that she's a bad person, but you know how mothers-in-law are, always want to give their opinion on everything." Their laughter followed me to the parking lot. I climbed into my old car with shaking hands, tears threatening to spill. For 30 years, I'd been the center of Michael's world. In one night, I'd become an inconvenience to be discarded. The drive home felt endless. Highway lights blurred through tears. I finally allowed to fall freely. A romantic song played on the radio, reminding me of dancing with my late husband at our own wedding so many years ago. He'd promised to always protect me. Now I was alone, facing this harsh new reality. I arrived home past midnight, feet swollen and heart shattered. I removed my shoes at the entrance and walked barefoot to my bedroom, feeling cold floor against tired soles. The purple dress I'd chosen with such care now seemed like a ridiculous costume, the uniform of an old woman who tried to pretend she still mattered. The following days brought a strange mixture of silence and expectation. I waited for Michael to call, to share honeymoon stories, to ask how I was, to maintain that connection we'd shared for 30 years. But my phone remained silent as a tomb. A week after the wedding, I decided to call him. "Hi, honey. How are you? How was the honeymoon?" I asked in the cheeriest voice I could manufacture. His response was curt. "Great, Mom. Vanessa sends her regards. Listen, I'll call you later. We're busy settling some things with the house." The house. Not my house or our house. Just the house. As if I'd never existed in his domestic life. I hung up feeling more alone than ever, staring at photographs of little Michael decorating my living room. That bright-eyed boy who'd run to hug me every time I picked him up from school. Now, he was a stranger sending regards through his wife. 3 more days passed without word. I decided to bake his favorite cookies, those chocolate chip walnut cookies he loved, and use them as an excuse to visit. I dressed carefully in my prettiest mint green blouse and drove to their new house with a heart full of hope. I rang the doorbell, expecting my son's smile. Instead, Vanessa answered. She wore an expensive-looking wine-colored silk robe, her hair in a perfect bun, as though she just stepped from a salon. "Oh, mother-in-law, what a surprise," she said without a trace of genuine pleasure. "I brought cookies for Michael," I explained, lifting the basket I decorated with yellow ribbon. "His favorites." Vanessa accepted the basket without inviting me inside, examining the cookies as if they were evidence in a criminal case. How thoughtful. "Michael's in a very important meeting, but I'll tell him you stopped by." I stood on the doorstep like a rejected saleswoman, waiting for at least an offer of water or a simple, "How are you?" But Vanessa was already closing the door. "Thanks for the cookies, mother-in-law. Have a lovely day." The door slam echoed in my ears like a death sentence. During the drive home, tears blurred my windshield. I pulled to the roadside to cry without restraint, pounding my wrinkled fists against the steering wheel. How had it come to this? How had I allowed that woman to steal my son so easily? That night, eating dinner alone before the television, I remembered something my late husband had told me shortly before his death. "Alice, if anything happens to me, don't let anyone walk all over you. You're stronger than you know, and you have more than you realize." At the time, I hadn't fully grasped his words. Now, they were beginning to make sense. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in months. I reviewed the documents my husband had left me. I retrieved the safe box from the closet, the one holding our most important papers, and began organizing them. birth certificates, marriage certificate, house deed, insurance policies. That's when I found the envelope that would change everything. Inside was a deed to a property I'd completely forgotten about, a 500-acre estate my husband had inherited from his uncle, now entirely mine. The legal document was crystal clear and indisputable. I was the sole owner of one of the most prosperous estates in the region. My heart raced as I read the details. The property included farmland, livestock, a 5-bedroom main house, and 3 employee cottages. The most recent appraisal estimated its value high enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life and leave a substantial inheritance. But the most important thing wasn't the money. It was the power to decide my own destiny, to not depend on anyone, to not beg for affection or accept crumbs of attention. For the first time in weeks, I smiled genuinely. I secured the documents in a safe place and made a decision. I wouldn't tell anyone about this inheritance. Not Michael, and certainly not Vanessa. My instinct told me this would be my ace in the hole, my salvation when the right moment arrived. That same week, my instinct proved sharper than I'd imagined. Vanessa began calling with suspicious frequency, but not to ask how I was or invite me to dinner. Her calls had one specific purpose: extracting information about my properties and finances. Mother-in-law, Michael and I were thinking perhaps you'd be more comfortable in a smaller place, she said during one supposedly casual conversation. This house must be quite a burden for someone your age. Haven't you considered selling and moving to a more manageable apartment? Her words sent chills down my spine. The subtlety with which she suggested I relinquish my home was terrifying. No, dear, I'm very comfortable here, I replied, maintaining a sweet tone. This house holds so many precious memories. Yes, of course. But think about it. With the money from the sale, you could afford some luxuries, perhaps travel, and we could help you manage that money so it lasts longer. She insisted with that syrupy voice I'd learned to despise. 2 days later, Michael visited for the first time since the wedding, but he wasn't simply coming to see his mother. He arrived with a clear agenda. "Mom, Vanessa and I have been discussing your future," he began, sitting on the sofa where I used to comfort him during nightmares. "My future?" I asked, feigning innocence, though I knew exactly where this conversation was headed. My son avoided direct eye contact, just like when he was a child who'd done something wrong. "Yes, we think this house is too large for you. You seem tired lately, stressed. Vanessa knows an excellent real estate agent who could advise you and get a good price," he explained nervously, fidgeting with his car keys. The pain I felt was physical, as if a knife had been plunged into my chest. My own son, the boy I'd raised with such devotion, was trying to convince me to sell the house where he'd grown up, where he'd taken his first steps, where we'd built all our memories together. "Michael, do you truly believe I should sell the house?" I asked him directly, needing to hear his answer without Vanessa's filter. For a moment, I saw the vulnerable boy he used to be, hesitating, struggling between what he knew was wrong and what his wife had planted in his mind. "It's just, Vanessa's right. You should enjoy life more, have fewer worries," he murmured. But his voice sounded rehearsed, as though reciting someone else's script. That night, after Michael left with empty promises to visit more often, I sat in my kitchen with chamomile tea and made a decision that would change everything. I called my friend Rachel, the only person I could completely trust. "Rachel, I need to tell you something very important, but you must promise this stays between us," I said when she answered. Her voice immediately turned serious. Rachel and I had been friends for over 40 years. We'd practically raised our children together. "Of course, Alice. What's wrong? You sound worried." I told her everything. Vanessa's attitude from day one, how they treated me at the wedding, the attempt to convince me to sell my house, and finally, the estate inheritance I'd kept secret. "Good Lord, Alice. A 500-acre estate, and you haven't told them?" Rachel exclaimed. "Thank heaven you kept quiet. That girl looked like a shark the moment I saw her at the wedding." Her words confirmed my instincts had been correct. "Rachel, I feel like something terrible is going to happen. The way they look at me, as if I'm an obstacle to be removed. I'm afraid they're planning something." Listen carefully, friend. Rachel told me with characteristic firmness. Tomorrow we're seeing a lawyer together. You need to protect all your assets before those vultures realize what you actually have. And please, don't sign anything, absolutely anything, without consulting me first. The next day, Rachel picked me up early. She'd contacted a trusted attorney, Robert, who had an office downtown, an older gentleman with gray hair and intelligent eyes who'd handled similar cases for decades. Mrs. Alice, from what your friend tells me, you're in a very delicate situation, he explained after reviewing all my documents. It's common for well-intentioned relatives or not so well-intentioned to pressure elderly people to transfer properties. My advice is that we legally protect all your assets. Robert spread my documents across his mahogany desk, forming a mosaic of my financial life. Mrs. Alice, what you have here is considerable. This estate alone is worth more than many entire family fortunes, he explained, tapping the appraisal with his finger. What concerns me, he continued, adjusting his glasses, is the behavior pattern you're describing. First, they emotionally isolate the person. Then they make them feel incapable of managing their own affairs. Then they present a solution which coincidentally benefits them. His words chilled my blood because they described exactly what I'd been experiencing. Rachel squeezed my hand gently. Tell him about the notary friend. Robert raised an eyebrow with interest. I told him about Vanessa's visit with Paul, about the little papers for the house, and how they'd arrived unannounced like hunters tracking prey. Typical, the lawyer murmured. Taking notes. They bring a notary, someone willing to overlook irregularities. They pressure you to sign documents under the premise of simplifying things. He explained he'd seen cases where elderly people lost their entire estates in a single signing session. What can I do to protect myself? I asked, feeling as though I stood in the middle of an invisible battlefield. The lawyer smiled for the first time since our conversation began. Quite a lot. We can create an irrevocable trust. We can document any coercion attempts. And above all, we can prepare for when they reveal their true intentions. We left the lawyer's office with a clear plan and several documents protecting my assets. But more importantly, I left with certainty that I wasn't crazy, that my suspicions were founded. Rachel invited me to her house for lunch, where her husband Anthony greeted me with his usual bear hug. Alice, that girl has dollar signs in her eyes, Anthony told me as we ate Rachel's stew. She gave me a bad feeling at the wedding. She spent the whole time calculating, seeing who had what, asking about people's businesses. His observations confirmed my worst fears. Over the next several days, I maintained my normal routine, but with heightened awareness. Every phone call, every unexpected visit, every casual comment about my advanced age or my need for help, I interpret them all with new clarity. It was as though I developed X-ray vision for detecting true intentions. Wednesday afternoon, while watering my garden plants, I saw Michael's car arrive. My heart accelerated, no longer with joy, but with apprehension. When he emerged accompanied by Vanessa, I knew the moment I'd been dreading had arrived. "Hi, Mom." Michael greeted me with that tense smile he perfected since his marriage. Vanessa walked behind him, carrying a bulky folder and that air of smugness that irritated me deeply. "May we come in? We want to discuss something important with you." I invited them into the living room, the same place where Michael had played with toy cars for years, where I'd read him bedtime stories, where we'd watched his favorite cartoons together. Now that sacred space had become a courtroom, and I was the accused. "Mom, we've been very worried about you," Michael began in a patronizing tone that felt completely foreign. "Vanessa, and I think you need help managing your financial affairs. It's normal at your age to feel overwhelmed by so many responsibilities." Vanessa opened her folder like a general unfolding battle maps. "Mother-in-law, we've spoken with several specialists in senior finance. They all agree the best approach would be simplifying your estate, consolidating everything into safer, more manageable investments." "Specialists?" I asked, feigning confusion while my blood boiled inside. "What specialists?" "I haven't spoken to any specialists." My mind registered every word, every gesture, just as Robert had advised. That's exactly why, Mom. Michael interjected with exaggerated patience used for small children. You haven't had proper guidance. Vanessa knows some very qualified people who can help you protect your money and secure your future. Vanessa extracted several documents from her folder, spreading them across my coffee table like poker cards. Look, mother-in-law, we have a very convenient proposal here. An investment fund that would give you guaranteed returns. Much better than having money tied up in properties requiring maintenance and causing you headaches. I pretended to examine the papers with confused old woman's tired eyes, but I was actually memorizing every detail. The document proposed selling my house and transferring funds to a joint account where Michael and Vanessa would have decision-making power over my investments to protect me from potential scams. And where would I live if I sell the house? I asked in a trembling voice, perfectly playing the role of vulnerable grandmother they expected. Vanessa smiled with that fake sweetness she perfected. Oh, mother-in-law, don't worry about that. We've already found a lovely retirement home with 24-hour medical care. You'd be much safer and more comfortable there. A retirement home. The words echoed in my head like funeral bells. There was their complete plan. Strip me of my house, control my money, and lock me in an institution where I couldn't be a nuisance to their perfect new life. All wrapped in the golden paper of concern and filial love. A retirement home, I repeated, letting my voice crack slightly. But Michael, I feel fine here in my house. All our memories are here. Vanessa and Michael exchanged that complicit look I'd learned to detect, that silent communication between conspirators. Mom, we know it's difficult, but think about it, Michael insisted, leaning toward me with that condescending smile. At the home, you'd have company, activities, medical attention, and we could visit whenever we wanted without worrying about your safety. Whenever they wanted. Not every day, not regularly, but when convenient for them, like visiting a pet in a kennel. I felt rage so intense I had to concentrate on maintaining my performance as a helpless old woman. Besides, Vanessa added, pulling more papers from her infinite folder, we've calculated that with the sale of this house and some smart investments, you could live very comfortably without worrying about anything. We'd handle all the paperwork and financial decisions. There it was, the final trap. They control my money while I vegetated in an asylum, waiting for their sporadic visits, grateful for whatever crumbs of attention they tossed my way. It was a brilliantly cruel plan, executed with the precision of financial surgeons. And what if I don't want to sell the house? I asked in a small voice, as if the idea had just occurred to me. Vanessa sighed theatrically, like a patient teacher explaining mathematics to a slow child. Mother-in-law, we understand it's hard to accept, but at your age, it's not safe living alone in such a large house. What if you fall and there's no one to help? Or if someone takes advantage of your kindness and scams you? The irony of her words would have made me laugh if I weren't so furious. She, who was trying to scam me at that very moment, was warning me about potential scammers. The audacity was astonishing. I need time to think about it. I murmured, rubbing my temples as if I had a headache. It's a lot to process at once. Michael stood and embraced me, a gesture that felt more like Judas's kiss than affection. Of course, Mom. Take all the time you need, but not too long, okay? These investment opportunities don't wait forever. Vanessa gathered her documents with the satisfaction of someone who knows they've already won the game. After they left, I sat in my living room feeling as though I'd survived a hurricane. My hands shook, not from old age, but from contained rage. I immediately called Robert. Robert, they came today, just as you predicted. They want me to sell everything and go to an asylum while they manage my money. My voice was choked with emotion. His response was calm but firm. Mrs. Alice, now comes the most important part. Don't sign anything, no matter how much they pressure you. And if possible, record any future conversations with them. We need to document their true intentions. I couldn't sleep that night. I walked through my house like a ghost, touching each piece of furniture, each photograph, each object with story. The rocking chair where I'd nursed Michael. The table where we'd done his elementary homework together. The piano I played to lull him to sleep during nightmares. All of it would be sold auctioned, scattered to feed the greed of a woman who hadn't even known my son when he was truly vulnerable. A woman who saw my maternal love only as an obstacle to her plans for financial greatness. The next day, Rachel arrived early with a digital recorder her grandson had lent her. "Friend, this is very easy to use. Just press this button and it records for up to 8 hours straight," she explained, demonstrating the small device. "Put it in your purse or apron pocket. If they come back with their proposals, we'll have their every word recorded." For 3 days, I maintained tense calm, waiting for my hunter's next move. Friday afternoon, the phone rang. It was Vanessa with that syrupy voice she perfected for manipulation. "Mother-in-law, have you had time to think about our proposal? It's just that we found a beautiful spot at the retirement home, but we need to reserve it soon because there's a waiting list." The artificial urgency in her voice confirmed they were anxious to close the deal before I could reflect too deeply or consult with anyone else. "Yes, dear. I've been thinking a lot," I replied with my best indecisive old woman performance. "Could you come tomorrow to explain all the details again? At my age, I sometimes forget things." I could almost feel her triumphant smile through the phone. "Of course, mother-in-law. We'll stop by tomorrow afternoon with all the papers. You'll see, it's the best decision for everyone." For everyone. As if being stripped of my home and autonomy was an act of generosity toward my executioners. Saturday afternoon, they arrived punctual as vultures circling carrion, this time accompanied by Paul the notary, a thin man with a sparse mustache and leather briefcase who examined my house with an appraiser's eyes while feigning politeness. "Mrs. Alice, what a pleasure to see you again." Paul greeted me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I've come prepared to facilitate all necessary procedures. The faster we resolve this, the fewer complications." My recorder was on in my apron pocket, capturing every word of this legal farce. I sat in my favorite armchair, the same one where I'd rocked Michael as a baby, and let them unfold their theater of false concerns. "Mom, we brought all the documents ready," Michael announced, spreading a pile of papers on my table. "You just need to sign here, here, and here, and we'll take care of everything else." His finger pointed to dotted lines like crosses in a cemetery. Vanessa sat beside me with that forced closeness aggressive salespeople use. "Mother-in-law, look how wonderful. Here are photos of the home where you'll live. Beautiful gardens, a TV room, even yoga classes for seniors." The photograph showed a place resembling a disguised hospital more than a home. Paul opened his briefcase ceremoniously, extracting an official seal, blue ink, and several forms with notarial letterhead. "Ma'am, these documents are perfectly drafted to protect your interests. The property sale, transfer of funds to the family trust, and authorization for your relatives to manage your finances in case of incapacitation." Incapacitation. That word hit me like a slap. They'd even prepared the next step, declaring me mentally incompetent if I ever rebelled against their decisions. The plan was so meticulous it gave me chills. "And what if I changed my mind later?" I asked with trembling voice, perfectly playing my role as confused old woman. Paul and Vanessa exchanged a look the recorder couldn't capture, but which I registered in my memory as evidence of their complicity. "Oh, mother-in-law, these decisions are final. For your own protection," Vanessa explained with exaggerated patience. "If we could change our minds all the time, any ill-intentioned person could confuse you and make you sign things not in your best interest." Ill-intentioned. The irony was so brutal, I had to bite my tongue to keep from exploding. There she was, stripping me of everything while warning me about people who might take advantage. "Besides, Mom," Michael added, taking my hand with tenderness I knew was false, "think how peaceful we'll be knowing you're safe and well cared for. We won't have to worry about you anymore. We won't have to worry about you." Translated from manipulator language, we won't have to pretend to love you now that we have your money. The tears welling in my eyes weren't an act. They were genuine pain, a mother betrayed by the son she'd raised with such devotion. "Don't cry, ma'am," Paul consoled with professional coldness. "It's normal to feel emotional about these changes, but you'll see you'll feel much calmer afterward." He placed a gold pen before me as if it were a loaded gun. I took the pen with shaking hands and brought it close to the first document, I could feel the tension in the air, the expectation of my tormentors waiting for their moment of final triumph. Vanessa leaned toward me like a thirsty vampire about a bite. But then, as if sent by a guardian angel, my doorbell rang. "Are you expecting someone?" Paul asked, clearly irritated. "No," I murmured, rising slowly. "Probably a neighbor." I opened the door. There stood Rachel, accompanied by Robert and another man I didn't recognize. "Good afternoon, Alice." Rachel greeted with a smile that instantly gave me strength. "I hope we're not interrupting." "Not at all," I replied, feeling as though the cavalry had just arrived. "Please, come in." Robert entered with that authoritative presence only experienced lawyers possess. The unknown man followed, carrying a professional video camera. Michael turned pale when he saw the newcomers. Vanessa tried quickly gathering her documents, but Paul froze like a pillar of salt. "What's going on here, Mom?" my son asked nervously. "Good afternoon, everyone," Robert said with professional courtesy. "I'm Mrs. Alice's attorney. I'm so glad I arrived in time to supervise this important legal transaction. I imagine all documents are in perfect order and that my client has had sufficient time to review them with independent legal counsel." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Paul pocketed his gold pen, as if it were burning him. Vanessa glanced at the door, as if calculating the shortest escape route. "Excuse me, and you are?" Paul asked, attempting to regain professional authority.